Hello and welcome to the 8th gathering of the Adventure Party on this, the 17th of May. I'm your party leader, Brad Ludwig. We ask that you peace tie your swords, holster your blasters, and make sure you have your power... see, I knew I was going to stumble over that. Ugh. And make sure you have your points properly allocated to your power framework while you are gathered at the meeting table. Oh, I totally blew that whole front opening there. What's wrong with me today? I'm a little flustered today. I don't know why. I think I know why it is. It's because my boss is in the room.
It's all right, Brad.
We'll introduce you to my boss in just a second, but we're going to introduce the second in command here at the Adventure Party, and that is Glenn Bittner. He is a movie reviewer of the YouTube show B-Movie Bunker and the creator of the RPG Mistrunner. How are you, Glenn?
I am reporting for duty, sir.
See, now it's the accents for you. Excellent. We both have our thing now, and I think that's worked out well.
Yes.
As I mentioned, our guest for this meeting of the Adventure Party is Andy Gille, and he's the Vice President of Digital Operations of Midwest Communications, and he's also a huge fan of the classic RPG computer games, namely like the TSR, SSI games,
Gold Box games.
Yes.
Ultima series. We're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Oh, yes. A little bit of the Bard's Tale.
Right.
We're
Bard's Tale.
dipping back in time.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to talk about the dawn of converting the pencil and paper experience to the digital frontier. And he has what I would call a museum. And he's if you're checking out the video on YouTube here, you can see some of the stuff that he has collected. And he's got basically a small museum, quote unquote, of some of the history of digital RPGs. And we are going to talk to Andy about that today. Welcome to the Adventure Party, Andy.
Well, thanks a lot, Brad. Good to be here.
We are going to start off by actually, I'm gonna pause for a second here, everybody, and this is one of those times where we'd like to get your feedback. We're going to make a change here. We're going to do a news story here, and this might be the last time that we do a news story before we get into the rest of the show. And what we're looking to do is do game reviews. We're going to maybe drop the news entirely. And Glenn, because by the very nature of his day job, he works in the game industry 24, well, not 24/7, but you know what I'm saying. That's his gig.
Never sleep.
The wicked never do. And so what we're looking to do is maybe make a change up here and do game reviews instead. So what we'd like to do is get some feedback from you. You can contact us at galacticnetcasts@gmail.com, and you can let us know what your thoughts are. Do you want us to keep doing the news, or do you want us to do game reviews? So let us know. What's going to happen here for this particular meeting of the Adventure Party is I'm going to do a news story, and then Glenn is going to review a game that has caught his eye and thinks that you guys should really know about. And the news story that I picked really kind of fits into our topic of discussion today. And that news story came to us by way of, it's a very long one, by boingboing.net. It's a very long story. We're going to hit the highlights on this. You can go to the show notes and you can check out that link, and you can read the entire story for yourself. But the title of this story is "Your Cyberpunk Games Are Dangerous." And now we're going to dip into the 1980s here. On January 17th, 1980, FBI agents descended upon a small business in Wisconsin to investigate a plot against the life of an American business executive in Beirut, Lebanon, named William Weatherby. The tip came to a local law enforcement agency from a concerned citizen who had chanced on a written description of the conspiracy, which the police duly handed over to the FBI. The investigators arrived at the offices of this company, TSR Hobbies. They learned that William Weatherby did not exist. He was a non-player character in a new espionage role-playing game called Top Secret, which TSR was playtesting. Okay, I want to ask you, who here has played TSR's Top Secret?
I played the hell out of it.
Yeah, I think I played two maybe 2 sessions of it.
Oh,
And it was a great concept.
Okay, that one I haven't played.
And this was pencil and paper, but the rest of this story kind of plays into some other interesting things that have gone on with the game industry running afoul of law enforcement. But for those that haven't played it, it was a great concept. It was like, for the first time ever, you could play James Bond. It had all the cool gadgets in it. It had a great concept, and you worked for a top secret agency, and it was really fun to play. Now, we're going to go back into the story here. This misunderstanding arose only 5 months after TSR obtained widespread notoriety in a similar confusion surrounding the disappearance of college student James Dallas Egbert III in East Lansing, Michigan. A private detective hired to find Egbert had learned that the young man played TSR role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons, at the time virtually unknown to mainstream America, and hypothesized that Egbert had come to believe that the game was real. Famously, this led for calls for the search of the college steam tunnels, where presumably Egbert would be found wandering in a deluded stupor, questing for monsters and treasure. Actually, Egbert had run away to Louisiana for unrelated reasons, but a seed was then planted in American popular imagination and brought us that wonderful, what was that, made-for-TV
Mazes and
movie?
Monsters.
Mazes
yeah.
and Monsters with
Tom
maybe
Hanks.
maybe an actor you may or may not have heard of, Tom Hanks. And thus led to the huge stigma that was really kind of heaped upon role-playing games.
There was a very huge hysteria in the 80s. I mean, this was not Oprah and everything. You'd have people, and, I mean, it was just taken as fact that if you played D&D, you were going to somehow start worshiping the devil, and
it was part of the satanic panic.
It was part of the satanic panic, absolutely, and which was absolutely false.
Yep.
But in the 80s, everything was taken as fact. I mean, it was like smoking is bad for you.
And what's interesting now is in 5th edition, they're starting to bring some of those demonic elements back into the game that they removed in the 80s to kind of do some PR damage control.
Sure.
So it's going to be kind of interesting how that plays out, or if we see another resurgence of people burning, D&D books to drive the demons out of their children or whatever.
I think it was an interesting time for role playing, and I think it did kind of push me into the computer RPGs, and you'll see when I start talking about it a little bit how all of that kind of worked into getting me into computer RPGs, actually.
Sure.
As well as not having any friends.
See, that helps.
Right.
That really does. We're going to go into one more story here, but this is like a long laundry list, and it's a great read. I highly recommend that you check the show notes and read this, because it's a wonderful history and describing all of the issues that role-playing games have kind of run afoul of with law enforcement and with news agencies kind of picking up on hysteria and vomiting it out as fact when it is not even remotely close to fact. The last story here was Steve Jacks. Where is it? I'm kind of piecemealing and going through this story here, and it was a Steve Jackson. There we go. Yeah. A decade later, on the 1st of March, 1990, the Secret Service raided Steve Jackson Games in Austin, Texas, and confiscated the manuscript of a product in development. One of the agents serving the warrant grumbled in Steve Jackson's presence that his company was producing a manual for computer crime. In addition to the draft of the game, Jackson reported that the Secret Service also seized the 2 office computers the manuscript was on and thousands of dollars worth of associated hardware and software. This time, the misunderstanding admitted of no simple resolution. Top Secret 1, when the FBI... Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was a weird ending to that. That was a typo. When the FBI visited TSR in 1980, they found no Berettas, no exploding pens, no tuxedoed spies, so no assassination appeared imminent. The Secret Service came to Steve Jackson Games a decade later in an investigation into computer hacking, which everyone knew required only a cocky teenager, an inexpensive personal computer, and forbidden knowledge. Of course, you know, he had movies like War Games and the made-for-TV movie that we talked about earlier with Tom Hanks to just stoke the fires of that jackassery that really, you know, led to taking the whole.
Well, I think it's interesting that in the first case in 1980, when they raided the TSR office, they explained things, everything was dropped. This in 1990, I think you had some of this role-playing panic going on. You also had a misunderstanding of what computers were and the internet and things like that. I think that all boiled into really causing a much greater problem for Steve Jackson Games in this instance, which they didn't get out of it quite as easily. And it actually was pretty detrimental to their business. Other than that, they maybe got some marketing out of the fact that the Secret Service had raided their office.
They were just and this story, like I said earlier, is a lot longer and is a wonderful read for any of you that are listening to this who are into the pen and paper. I keep saying pen and paper, pencil and paper, whatever. Pen is too permanent for me. I need to erase everything. If you've listened to earlier episodes, you know how inept I am in writing down numbers and getting the math right on anything. So I'm not allowed to use pens on any character sheet that I have. So yeah.
Well, in the 90s, like especially the early 90s, the internet was kind of feared as well.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
it was like all this. There was that Sandra Bullock movie, The Net.
Yeah.
Remember that one?
Yes.
It was just this dark vision of the internet in the future, and all the information is going to be out there, and people are going to be, you know. And it mentions in the story the William Gibson novel Neuromancer, which I always think Philip K. Dick wrote for some reason, and you always correct me on, but William Gibson novel Neuromancer, and that actually is the reason. One of the reasons I thought this was an interesting article is that's also a game that they made they made the novel into a RPG for a computer RPG for the Commodore 64 and Apple II, and so I thought this was a very interesting article that really played into what I was going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And it was one of those things. It was like the perfect storm. I found this story and I'm like, oh, I know what our topic is going to be already. And oh, this is a perfect marriage of news story and topic. So that's why it's here. So
yeah, I would encourage all the listeners to really read this, because it is a very interesting article, and a lot hinges on this $79,000 document that they believe was stolen by Steve Jackson Games, which I won't ruin the surprise, but it was available a little easier than they didn't exactly need to do any hacking to find it.
No, not even remotely.
Pretty much their whole case hinged on the fact that they had stolen this $80,000 document. The true story turned out to be a little bit different.
Yeah, and not nearly as expensive.
No.
So, a great read. I can't. We both can't say enough about it.
Right.
So, since that's the case, I think we're going to drop it, and we are going to move on to Glenn and his review of what game do we have today?
We have The Castles of Mad King Ludwig.
Ha ha!
So this is from Bezier Games. It is creator is Ted Alspach, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, but I want to give a little background on King Ludwig first of all, for those who aren't familiar with him. He was king in Bavaria, I think 1864 is when he took the throne, and he was a bit eccentric. And when they were kind of absorbed by Prussia a couple years later, rather than worry about affairs of the state, he spent all of his time and the vast majority of his money building three rather extravagant and eccentric castles. One many people would know is, and my pronunciation of German stuff is horrific, which is a shame because I am half German, but Neuschwanstein Castle, which if you ever see a picture of a castle, there's about a 50% chance it is that one, and it is was the basis for the castle for Disneyland. And in this game, you are all basically building your own little castles, based kind of on the whims of King Ludwig and his ideas. And actually, many of the rooms you can build in the game are actually taken from his castles. There's like one is it's called the Venus Grotto, which was an underground cavern filled with water that he had made so that he could watch or experience Wagner in a unique way. So the way the game plays, I like the way the game plays is that each turn, one player takes turn as the master builder. And what they're going to do is you're going to have a series of rooms that are be available for building each turn. And they're going to be placed in a line going from 2,000 to about 15,000 marks, depending on how many players there are. And the master builder decides which rooms go where. So you can do that it gives you an advantage for several reasons. One is that if you see a room that somebody else wants to build really badly, you might make it way expensive so they can't get it. Or you might make it a little cheaper, because the trick of being master builder is that technically you're the guy doing all the work this turn, which means anytime anyone else wants to build a room, they pay you the money for the room. So if there's a room that you think that they want, but you don't want them to have it too easily, you might put it at, say, 8,000 or 10,000 marks. So if they pay for it, they're giving you a lot of money. The other nifty thing is that there are 10 different sizes of rooms, and there are several different varieties of rooms that you have. Each room gives you bonuses when you complete them. Completing means that you have all the doors are either blocked or lead into another corridor or another room. You can get money for extra rooms. There are bonus cards that will give you an extra point for every round room you have at the end of the game, or extra points for every square room or every corridor. And then there are ongoing favors that the king picks each turn, these 3 little favors, which give you specific bonuses that everyone's trying to compete for. You'd be like, whoever has the most living rooms gets 8 points, and the second most gets 4 points, and the third most gets 2. So you're all competing for some of these specific favors to garner points. It also has a really cool solo play version, which plays very similar to the base game, except that you don't pay money to yourself because you're the only person playing. You always pay to the bank, but you're trying to build rooms and until the deck runs out, and they've got a little scoring chart to show how well you did based on how many points you scored when you play solo. I love games that have solo features because sometimes I don't have a friend to play with. It's nice to have that little extra thing. But
I want to give you a hug now, Glenn.
I actually played the solo version twice last night. And it was a lot of fun. And I like building games. I love games that let me build things. It harkens back to my old D&D days where I never went anywhere without a pack of graph paper to just make maps of castles and dungeons. And this really scratches that itch. And it's a lot of fun just because you've got such a variety of rooms, so many different ways to set them up. And it's just this constant balancing of making sure you have enough money to buy what you want, but also not overspending on stuff, because it's like, I really want that room, but it's going to cost 15,000 marks, and I only have 16,000 total, which means next turn I can't buy anything. So it's a really well balanced game. I've liked it. I like it a lot so far, and it's fun building. I like building stuff.
So, are you a fan of the Euro Rails as well?
I am to a degree. What I like about this game is a 4-player game takes about 90 minutes. A 4-player game of Euro Rails takes about 90 days.
Yeah, it really does.
And I've been leaning much more towards shorter play games that play in under 2 hours, because when I can get people together to play a game that's outside of work, when I get my friends together, I want to get in as many games as possible. I want to show them as many new games as possible. This one's not super new. It's been out for a little while, but I won't always be doing new games on my review. I'm going to do games that I'm enjoying currently, and possibly a game that you might not have heard of, or you might have missed it because you don't work in a game store and see all the stuff that comes through.
Sure.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Glenn. So that game again is
Castles of Mad King Ludwig from Bezier Games.
All right, so check out your local game store and give it a look-see, and maybe pick that up. And you said 90 minutes for 4 people.
About that, yeah.
See, now that's a good, respectable. Well, we've talked about my lack of attention span when it comes to games. Once you hit the 3-hour mark, I've pretty much mentally checked out. So cool. Thank you very much, Glenn.
Absolutely.
We're going to move on now to Galactic Gaming news from Ryan Murphy. And he's a contributor, a regular contributor, to oh, excuse my cord just completely snagged on my leg here. Apologize. Let's start over with that. We're going to go to Galactic Gaming news with Ryan Murphy, and he's a regular contributor to Galactic Netcasts. His weekly segment is on the Mega feed, which you can subscribe to on galacticnetcasts.com. And he covers more of the digital beat. And for the first time ever in our now 8-episode history, we're going to be talking about we talked a little bit about where our topic is going to meet with what Ryan Murphy's digital beat of the gaming industry. Boy, that intro was just complete and utter garbage for the first. I don't know why I'm off today. My game is way off today. Anyways, hey, Ryan Murphy's got some stuff. He's going to talk about digital gaming, and boom, here we go. All right. Thanks for that report, Ryan. Sorry for that mumbled intro that I gave you. Now we're going to go into the Kickstarter Spotlight. And the Kickstarter Spotlight is where we talk about a new Kickstarter game that we think that you should be checking into. Thanks to Kickstarter and Indiegogo and other organizations like that, we're really kind of seeing a new renaissance of games. New games, it's not enough to have the imagination and the idea. You need the capital. You need the cash to make it happen. And it's good to see a lot of these independent folks creating really cool games and getting that chance, because Kickstarter and Indiegogo and other organizations like that are there to help out. And what we're going to do is we're going to recap last week's Kickstarter Spotlight, which was, there we go, it was War Quest. And that was one that Glenn brought to us. And wow, 402 backers, and their total that they needed was 75,000. And as we mentioned last time, they met that goal within 32 hours, wow, which is ridiculously fast. And if you just think about it, and think about the fact that to get a game was $120. And this game is no fooling around. It's a box set where you get 115 miniatures. Granted, they're plastic miniatures and whatever, but 25 millimeter scale, so you could reuse them in your D&D, pencil and paper game, or whatever fantasy game that you're playing, because that is the setting for this. They're up to 96. Oh, they're almost at $97,000. There's 10 days left to go in this particular project, so you can jump in, back the project. If you've got $120, I know that is a lot to spend up front, but like we were saying last week, if you're into pencil and paper, if you're into other stuff, it's not just the 115 miniatures. It's not the fact that for the first time ever, you're going to have a satyr miniature, which I have seen maybe once in my life, as a pewter mini. But you'll also be able to, you're going to have orc archers. Where do you find stuff like that? You really don't. But now that they've hit some of these stretch goals, there's going to be even more figures that are going to be added to this. And if you pay the additional $60, so you drop the $120, you pay an additional $60, you can get the Wraith King. The Wraith King figure is it's a demonic-looking armored horse with a demonic skeleton warlord sitting on top of it with banners and flags that are attached to the saddle of the horse off to the side, with spears shoved through the skulls of, I'm going to assume, his enemies. It is a badass looking miniature, and that could be yours for an additional $60. If you're going to go 120 for that, the $60 for this Wraith King, which is another I'm assuming another foe that you can fight in this game. go ahead and do it. The other thing too is you get 80 plastic coins that can be reused for other games. Or say you want to do your own cheap ass game. You want to come up with and create your own game. Well, you've got different components here where you can play test using some of this. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do for that $120 that you're going to lay out, depending on the type of gamer you are.
I want to point out, Brad, that $60 for the Wraith King, that gets you, it's an expansion. It gets you 36 more figures.
Oh, that's right. If I would have scrolled down a little bit further, you get 36. Oh my God, special cards and rules for a skeleton army as well. Jeez. Yeah. You're not just paying $60 for a fancy figure. You're paying $60 to get a whole skeleton army with a badass dead dude on an armored horse. Then there's for an additional $35, you can get Dwarven Elites, which are dwarves riding polar bears, and they're armored up. This is a crazy game, and yeah, $120 gets you in, gets your foot in the door of some awesome gaming here. All right, enough drooling over that. We're going to talk about a new game that we found on Kickstarter called Defenders of the Last Stand Adventure Board Game. Now, this right now has 527 backers. Their goal is 50,000, and right now, as of the time that we are recording this meeting of the Adventure Party, they're at 48,619. There's 22 days left to go. Barring some unfortunate incident, this is going to get backed. So if you toss your money Jason Maxwell's way, you're going to get a cool board game here. And this is a game that was designed by Richard Launius. I'm probably massacring his last name, and I apologize for that. But he was designer of last year's Run, Fight, or Die, which is nominated for a Dice Tower Award this year. There's some new stretch goals that they've written out here. It's a very, very interesting looking game. Some of the miniatures here, it looks like it's a post-apocalyptic, sort of a Mad Max kind of a game. And
I heard there's a new movie out for that too.
Yeah, there might be. That might be the other reason why I selected this game. I'm not sure. But it does kind of fit into something that is new and very apropos at this moment in time. Defenders play 1 to 5 players. It is a cooperative, meaning all players are on the same team against the game engine, quote unquote. It can take 2 to 3 hours to play, but since it is a scenario-based game, that time can vary. It is of medium complexity. So you have different character cards, which have different abilities that each character have to help you defend against the game. You're playing against the house, as it were, and your job is to defend your area against the house. It's a very beautifully laid out map. I would highly encourage you to, if you're, check out the YouTube version of this particular episode. I'm going to pull up a screen share here so you folks at home can check this out. It's a very beautiful looking board. Kind of a mountainous terrain on one side. There seems to be a dryish riverbed, and on the other side is a small mountain range, and everything that kind of happens in the game takes place pretty much in between those two areas. It's kind of a wide open desertish area in which you play in. A lot of different cards here. I'm going to take a look here. Your base to get in on this is $65. And that gets you the shipping for the Defenders of the Last Stand. And inside are 100 miniatures, which include 4 large clan leader sculpts, 4 unique sets of minion sculpts, and 5 heroes plus 3 Kickstarter bonus heroes. There are, of course, additional goals, stretch goals that they have if they make it to, let's see, I'm trying to get to the stretch goal area here on the list. I'm going to stop the screen share here. It's dragging me down a little bit. All right.
I know at 60K they add Barter Town.
Oh, nice. Oh, there we go. Whew. Okay. So, yep, they've at 50,000, and this goes to all backers. You get 3 extra heroes that are unlocked. At 75,000, which I think that they're going to hit. I think that's a fairly safe bet at this point. You get Rock and Roll with Rock without the C. An additional hero card and mini are unlocked. At 100,000, you get Gas and Ammo minis unlocked. It's their WMD level. There's a new miniature, and that would be a paid add-on. So there's a lot of wonderful things that they've got going on in this game. And if you're into the post-apocalyptic sort of setting and defending against the oncoming horde to take away your stuff, I mean, oh God. I'm going to do the screen share here real quick. The minis that they have here, you've got one here where a dude is standing, and he looks like a Roman soldier. He's got the helm on with the feathered, the top to the hat, and he's got a car which has chains wrapped around the hood at the base of what is it, the air filter that's sticking out of the hood, and wrapped underneath where the tires are with a skull with goggles on it mounted to the basically the nose of the car, and like a barrel that's attached to the back of this car, where obviously there's some kind of fuel that's in there. And then there's like pockmarks from where a gun has strafed the side of the car. It's just ridiculous what they've done here. There's also a woman riding some kind of mutant, I don't know, bison thing that looks like it's the size of an elephant. It's ridiculously huge. So there's a lot of wonderful, kind of tropes that you're hitting here with that post-apocalyptic type setting. And for $65, you could get in on the fun here. So would you guys sit down and play a 2 to 3 hour post-apocalyptic themed board game with a few people?
I think I'm more interested in the War Quest game. That would be more my speed.
Sure. You're more of a fantasy type.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I would play a post-apocalyptic game like that. It does look very cool. This Kickstarter is cool and looks like a great value. But just personally, I'd be more into the War Quest, which I did think was really cool. That $125 level, you really got some great stuff.
It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And 10 days left to go on War Quest. But yeah, wow. See, like I said, we've kind of hit a renaissance of some interesting games. I mean, each week we find something that's truly amazing, and the only thing that it's lacking is not imagination. It's the cash, and seeing people pony up to back something that is truly amazing, very imaginative, and looks like it's well worth the play. And that's why we bring it to you guys, so that you can check these things out. And maybe you don't go out some night. Maybe you drink a beer at home with a bunch of your friends. Well, you probably all have beers. You wouldn't share a beer. That's weird. That leads to dancing or something. I don't know. But anyways, you have a couple of beers and sit around and play a cool board game. That'll keep you out of trouble and off the streets. So, all right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on into the interview portion, where we're going to talk to Andy about the kind of the history of digital RPGs at that point in time where computers became affordable to get them into the homes, but also you had game companies like TSR, and TSR bought out SSI, or did TSR spin off? Or is it?
I think SSI did the gold box games for TSR.
Okay.
TSR went to them, and they're the ones who developed the game for them. TSR liked what they saw in Ultima and what was going on with Ultima.
Sure.
Apparently, and that's kind of what led to that was what the impetus behind the gold box games were. Actually came out of Ultima.
Nice.
So
see, and that's why we brought Andy in here, because he knows. he loved these games.
I did.
And this is at the point in time, the Renaissance, where the pen and paper, I keep doing pen and paper, the pencil and paper experience.
Brad never makes mistakes. That's why he uses pen.
Yeah.
And never roll poorly either, so you don't lose any hit points, right?
No, I'm a horrible role player. Yeah, this is the point in time where the experience that people had was being transferred into a digital arena, and you could play a game basically by yourself.
Right.
And you could do a little bit of team management where you manage all your different players, or if you had one character that you're just playing, this is the point in time where you got to have that experience, but on a computer, which had to be truly mind-blowing at that time.
It was really, I guess I should talk a little bit about myself. I have to talk a little bit about myself.
Absolutely. Let's start at the beginning. What got you into it?
Well, to tell you how I got into these. And I will say that I've played, modern computer role-playing games like Baldur's Gate and Skyrim.
Sure. Yep.
But there's just a simplicity and pureness that I find really compelling about the old RPGs from the 80s, and I still do like them. I have there's some I don't know, what do you call them, downloads that you can get abandonware downloads.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Of most of these games that are out there. Nice. And I have booted some of them up and played them. I'll tell you about my experiences with that as well.
Cool.
Now I used to play these games on the Commodore 64. Actually, I had a Commodore 128D, which I'll also talk about, which was a little better than the Commodore 64. But I don't know, maybe it was the time that I had at that time to spend with them.
Yeah.
Maybe it was maybe they aren't simpler. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe these new games are easier to play. I just don't have the time to devote to really learning some of them. But
sure. And
maybe I was just young enough to delve into these. But I do really. These are kind of my favorite computer RPGs. And I'll talk about them. I don't know that I'm an expert on the history of these necessarily, but I know about.
You're an expert.
Okay, well, I know about the ones that I played. Now, there's a couple of things that I do like about these classic computer role-playing games, and one is I think they're a little bit more like paper RPGs.
Okay.
In that, well, they require your imagination a little bit more than something like Skyrim, where you can see exactly what you're fighting, you can see how the battle is going. There's I end up hand mapping dungeons a lot of times in these games because it didn't do that for you to figure out where you, and a lot of these games had basically they were a text adventure with a tiny amount of graphics.
Sure. And
the graphics were usually up in the corner of the screen. You used the arrow keys to move around in this very nondescript dungeon that had no landmarks or anything, so it behooved you to map these things, which is a lot like something you would do in a pen and paper RPG. So that's one thing that I really find compelling about them. I guess that is something that's kind of interesting about them. Not that that's a great thing. I wouldn't want to do that now. If I had to hand map a dungeon in something on my Xbox One, I don't think I'd be very happy about it.
Yeah, I'd be a little pissed myself.
But it was, because of the limitation of technology, it's kind of cool, Yeah. Stakes are a little higher because you can't just save right before you go after a boss. You might have to go through an entire dungeon and get your whole party killed, and then start back from an inn in some other town to try and travel back through his horde of minions before you're able to face him again.
I think that I played I think it was the second Bard's Tale,
right?
And I got my ass handed to me, and I had to go back.
Oh, it's terrible.
It was awful. It's like, then you had to sit and think about what you did wrong.
Absolutely.
And then go through everything and go, okay, now I need to try this different thing. And if that didn't work, well, then you had to start all over again.
Right.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Which,
again,
go ahead, Glenn.
If those Bards Tale games, if that was actually a tabletop game, people would have stopped playing D&D altogether.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's times where it's like you make like 15 different adventuring parties before you get one that makes it to level 2.
Absolutely,
you totally kick open that door and it's like you got 10 barbarians. It's like, well, I'm screwed.
It actually says in the Bard's Tale manual that you should just, if your player gets killed up to level 3, you should just create a new one. And once your characters become level 3, then maybe you should start saving. So it actually says that in the manual, because you just get it's hard to survive in the beginning of Bard's Tale when you have lower ranking characters and they can't heal themselves. I guess another thing that I liked was all of the manuals and stuff. The tangible things you got with the game. You usually get like you get the adventurer's journal in the gold box game. It's something, there's entries in here that are in a scripty font that it's really cool, and you get an actual manual that has spells and things like that in it that you're lucky if you get a PDF with your game.
Yeah, you really are. You really are.
And that's not entirely true. There's some games that come with bigger, and you can always buy books, but that's kind of stupid these days with the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
But it came with some really cool stuff, and I guess that was one thing that attracted me to pencil and paper RPGs as well. Is you had these books that had I was always a big fan of comics, and the guy who got me into RPGs, my friend in elementary school, that's actually initially how I started hanging out with him. Was we were big comics fans.
Oh, sure.
And it had these really cool pictures that were drawn in there and stuff, and the book was just a really tangible, cool thing that you got with these computer RPGs, and you don't get that anymore. It makes sense because I'm sure it cost a hell of a lot of money to print those things.
Sure.
But it is a cool thing that I like about them.
I kind of wonder, just kind of touching on that a little bit, in games like Ultima or some of the other ones, you had multiple discs in a box.
Absolutely, yes.
So you were already going to have multiple discs, and they probably went, let's add a manual to it. But nowadays, you get maybe a Blu-ray DVD if you're playing like PlayStation 4 or like Xbox One. You've got a DVD that's got a ton of information on it, and it really doesn't pay because you got that slim packaging anyway. You're not going to fit anything in there.
They figure if you want to learn more, there's probably a link to a website you can go to. Right?
Exactly.
Right. So that is something that's really cool that I do like about these games is and that's why I've kept a lot of these things because it needs some neat stuff. So and I guess actually the manuals served as some of the copy protection as well.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, which I'll talk about it a little bit later as well. But turn-based combat, something I think is pretty cool. And there are games with turn-based combat these days, but
like the Fallout game. I think
you had mentioned. I haven't played that one. I don't get to play. Unfortunately, I don't get to play a lot of RPG video games these days. Like I said, I did play Skyrim and some of the other ones, but they're it's more real-time video game type combat. Not that was missing from. There's a game called Mobius that I played when I was in Mobius. The Orb of Celestial Harmony was the full game name of the game by Origin, I believe, and that actually did have real-time combat in it. It had a little map that you'd walk through. It was game that was kind of based on Eastern philosophies and things. Okay. So and when you went into combat, it would take about 5 minutes to load your combat, and you kind of fought like Street Fighter 2 or whatever. You had but it was real time combat, which made it very unique for the 80s. But I think turn-based combat, there's something to be said about it. It gives you a little time to plan out a strategy and kind of think about what you're doing before it's and I don't know. Again, for the time, it was really cool. I liked it. I'm not sure that it would be a great thing to put. I'm not saying that this is the way a game should be made these days.
Sure, yeah,
like that. But I do think there's something kind of pure about turn-based combat. A little bit more like a paper RPG.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
If you want to hear a little bit more about how I got into these, okay. I got into pencil and paper role-playing games probably in like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and there's a kid named Vic that was into them. And he and I were both into comics, so sure. I'd go over to his house and he kind of talked to me a little bit about D&D, and again, like we had said before, it was kind of a forbidden thing back then. It was like, whoa, I don't know if I should play this or not. I might end up worshiping Satan. And,
I think somewhere I've got a chick track. And the episode hasn't posted yet. I'm almost done editing it. We had Patrick Rothfuss on last meeting of the adventure party, and he actually as a joke, bought a whole bunch of the D&D chick tracts.
Okay.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the chick tracts, go onto Google it, chick tracts D&D, and you can read this wonderful abomination about how D&D is the stepping stone to get you to sell your soul to Satan and go insane and get into drugs and hooking and all sorts of weird stuff.
And that's absolutely what happened to me. I mean, I did sell my soul to Satan. No,
but you've cleaned up nicely, and now you're the vice president
exactly.
of digital operations.
Of course, we Satanists hide ourselves in society very nicely. So, but it was kind of a forbidden thing.
Yeah.
And again, it was really cool. There's this book, and it's got these cool pictures in it, and it's kind of comic-like. And I didn't have at the time I didn't have a computer, so it was kind of like a video game. I couldn't. It was cooler than a video game. You could do anything you wanted. You could choose to fight a monster in a certain way. You could do whatever you wanted there. It was a really cool concept, I thought. And so we did play D&D. The 1983 Red Box edition is the one that we nice. Played, which you're aware of. I have that in my office, actually. Like I said, Brad, we did let the cat out of the bag here. I am Brad's boss, which is why he's very nervous tonight.
Probably.
I inflict my power upon him all the time.
He's the worst. Oh my God.
He was just in on Saturday. But anyway, but yeah, the 1983 D&D edition is the one that we played with the red box, and then when it hit the teal box and black box, we played those. And then DC Heroes, the Mayfair game version of that, was another one that we played because, like I said, we were into comics. I
think right over by your left arm, Andy, somewhere in there is I've got two reference manuals to the DC Mayfair stuff.
No kidding. That's
one
awesome.
is like the Atlas of the DC world, which is a fascinating read. Yeah, and awesome. I have one other one about some of the magic.
That was very cool. The Atlas to you'll have to show me those when we get done here, because that was some very cool stuff and kind of will give me an understanding of the DC universe. And I also played Marvel's Superheroes, which TSR I believe developed.
That was horrible.
But that was not as good a game.
No.
But it kind of introduced me to all of the the comics characters. Gave me a better understanding of what I was reading in the comics. And the 80s were actually a pretty great time for comics, unlike the 90s. I was a big Spider-Man fan, so we read Kraven's Last Hunt was during that time. There's some
and that was good.
Yeah, there were great stories.
And then soon after that,
then you had gold foil hologram special editions. Every 5 issues of Spider-Man was some kind of foiled atrocity. Right. And if you start a comic book podcast, like I'm going to talk about how awful the 90s were for comics. But Star Frontiers was another one we played.
Okay,
enjoyed that one. Kind of a space type game. It was mostly me and this guy named Vic, and occasionally he'd have his friends, and I kind of kept it a secret, because it was kind of a weird thing that we didn't want anybody else to know about. We didn't talk about it too much. It's kind of our secret thing.
First rule of Game Club.
Right, exactly. We didn't. I mean, we talked about it. Yeah, we talked about it at school and stuff, but we didn't bring our dice to school or anything like that. We didn't want people to know what we were doing. So it was kind of a clandestine thing that we did. Now, I went to a school that was in a certain part of town, and my parents moved to a different part. They bought a house. We lived in an apartment when I started going to this elementary school.
Okay.
And we moved to a different part of town. Well, my mom really did not like the elementary school that they had moved into. So she, I'm not sure what she did. She worked out some deal with it. It was not an easy thing to do back then.
Yeah.
Either. She worked out some deal where I could go to the elementary school that I had gone to previously, where Vic went. And
so just for, of course, this is for clarification for myself and not necessarily the listeners.
Right.
But you moved to the Statine area.
Well, no, actually, this is a different. Okay, I'm trying. People aren't gonna. I went to Thomas Jefferson School.
Okay,
in Wausau, and we moved to the Grant School District. Which
okay.
My mom did not like that elementary school, so she wanted me to continue going to Thomas Jefferson. She liked the teachers there,
sure,
whatever. And that was cool because I got to still hang out with Vic and stuff during the school year. But in summer, I never really saw him. You know, it was too far to bike, really, and you know, I wasn't really allowed to go that far. So if my parents wouldn't take me there, I didn't get to you know, see any of my friends from school. So one of the things I did to there were these choose your own adventure style books that actually I think TSR actually published some of them. If it wasn't,
what's that?
Return to Brookmere, Revolt of the Dwarves.
Yes,
things like that. Yep. And you know, you had a character sheet and everything, but you could play it yourself.
Yep.
You know, and I created a lot of my own role-playing games that I tried to get my sister to play with me.
I bet you that went over well.
And obviously they weren't as good as Glenn. I wasn't as good at this as Glenn was, because I never got any of them published. But I did try to make my own games, and was not very successful with that. Now, one of my friends did, and my uncle had an Apple II, and that was kind of my first foray into CRPGs. My uncle had a text adventure game, and I don't think it was Zork or Colossal Cave Adventure, which you've probably heard of. I'm not sure what it was. It was some knockoff of that, but it was a little bit more advanced, and you could enter your name in it, and you had some character attributes and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. And
I remember, you know, being a role player, I didn't want to. My uncle's like, well, put the name that you're going to use in there. So I typed in this name, which is the name of one of my characters that I use in D&D, and he's like, well, who the hell is Mark a Gnome? He just didn't get why I wouldn't enter my own name in that. But it was pretty cool. You know, it was kind of it was a way to play RPGs by myself, and I didn't have to try to assemble anybody or try to get a ride from my mom over to do that. So I thought that would be really, really cool. And I was already kind of interested in computer programming. Yeah. It was something that at school they had taught us some basic and stuff. So I saw how, you know, I thought that you could create one of these in BASIC and it would be a great idea, you know. You can't, because I tried. And, so I actually sat and I would write out code in like a notebook for, you know, I had a fighting system and things like that. And, you know, variables held your hit points, things like that, and your attributes. And when I did actually get a computer, one of the first things I did was try to, you know, write my own game. And basically it's just far too slow. So, you know, it moved it like
they used to publish in like Dragon Mags if they'd give you all the coding to make your own little games, and you'd spend like hours just copying like 10 pages of just this text. And of course, the first time you run it doesn't work because you typed one letter wrong.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then when you play, it's like, enter your name, Bob. You see a door, Bob. Open the door. Congratulations, you win. That's like the whole game.
Yep.
That was like 5 hours of work for that.
So one of my friends who had an Apple II had Wizardy for it. And he wasn't really a role player. He kind of popped it in. I'm not sure how he got Wizardry because he wasn't interested in it all. I thought it was incredible. It was like a text adventure, but it had graphics. It had, you know, a fighting system. It was a lot like D&D. And, you know, you saw a picture of the monster you were fighting. Sure. I thought it was really, really cool. And, you know, the Wizardry had a lot of influence on later RPGs, like the Gold Box, the Bards Tale, and actually some of the console games like Dragon Warrior, which you may have heard of. It's a NES game. It was actually one that I played in the 90s as well. Final Fantasy too took some elements of Wizardry. Wizardry was actually very popular in Japan, and believe it or not, there was a Wizardry 8 that came out in 2001.
Nice.
Which I've never played. I played up to Wizardry 2, I think is one of the ones that I've actually played. Huh. So my mom was a hairdresser when I was a kid and went back to school. She went to college. Sure. And when she we didn't have a whole lot of money when she was you know, going to college. When she finally graduated, I was able to, the first thing, one of the things she bought was a computer for me because I had begged for it for so long.
Sure.
And the computer I got was the Commodore 128D. It had a 5 1/4 inch disc. You know? And I begged my mom for this thing because ostensibly I could use it to study, you know, and
Wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course it turned into a super game machine because there was actually there was like a whole band of kids in our area here that were Commodore 64 pirates. Basically, it was a huge Commodore 64 piracy ring. There's a computer program named Mr. Nibble that could copy any.
Yes. Oh God, I forgot about that. Yeah,
exactly. And there was a guy named Rich that was also into role-playing games.
Okay.
And he had a Commodore 64, and he was a guy who I traded a lot of games with. And one of the reasons that, well, first of all, computer games were, you know, like I think Wizardry, one of the Wizardries was like $49 in the 80s, which I did the conversion on it. That's like $90.
Yeah.
You know, which you know, you can get some of these special editions like Call of Duty. You get a little statue with it or something, like those are $90 now.
Yeah.
But it was unfathomable. I mean, I would have never been able to save up this much money from my allowance.
I remember wanting to get like an Atari 2600 and going, God, $80? $100? Are you kidding me?
It was exactly. It was as much as the game systems.
Yeah.
Back then. So we did. I mean, the way I got some of these games, which is, you know, back then it just didn't seem like a big deal. We pirated them.
Sure.
So,
yep.
And they did have copy protection, and the copy protection involved these. I have an actual example of that here. There's a cardboard wheel, like in the Gold Box games.
Yep.
They have a cardboard wheel. You line up these runes that they'll give you 2 runes that you line up on the cardboard wheel, and it gives you like a word or well, these are nonsense words, but some of them do make some. Wyvern here is the word that you type in if these two you know, if these 2 runes were what the computer showed you. So you had to type that in or it wouldn't let you play the game. Now, some other ones had like an adventurer's journal like this, and it would say, you know, what's the 3rd word on page 20?
Yes, I remember having to do that on a friend of mine's game. Yep.
Right. So what our solution to that was to copy it on the copy machine at the grocery store, because grocery stores had 10-cent copies back then.
Yep.
And we could make copies of these games, and we had no problem with it. And we made copies of the wheels too. Wheels were a little more difficult to copy. You had to cut out these little you know, the holes for the words, but you could get it to work. You put one of those you know, paper fasteners in that spreads apart, and we'd play them that way. But so we did a lot of you know, piracy, but we did some game trading too. My parents were nice enough to buy me some games. We never had a real place to buy games like this, so I'm not really sure where Rich got them actually, because I never saw them in the stores here. There was one place that did have like Ultima and some of the other games, and that was this place called TRW here in Wausau. The guy was just kind of a jerk though. And like I remember I went in there and was kind of looking around at the game, and he was like, "Don't touch a game, kid." And I'm like, "Hey, you know, I wasn't going to touch a game." He was just not a very nice guy, so I didn't like going in there. But it was hard to find these, and Rich had them, so I would trade. I remember there was some Microprose games that I got. I got a version of Red Storm Rising was a game for the Commodore 64, and I think that's what I traded for Pool of Radiance.
Nice.
That's how I got Pool of Radiance from Rich. Now there was actually a store that did sell the Bards Tale. Was Prangiway.
Oh yeah,
I remember Prangiway. They had actually a huge Commodore 64 section, and I'd go there and just kind of drool over things. It was actually in the neighborhood that I lived in, so I was able to like ride my bike over there or skateboard. And
Prangiway, I know, was over by.
That's where East Bay is. Now.
Okay, yeah.
Nobody's gonna understand.
Yeah, no, everybody's like, what?
Yeah, I'm sorry to you.
No, that's
everybody else who's listening, not from our area, but. But yeah, they did carry Bards Tale there, and Bards Tale 3 Thief of Fate. I actually didn't. Bards Tale 3 Thief of Fate was the Bards Tale that I spent the most time playing.
Okay.
I did have Bards Tale 1 and 2, but 3 was really the one that I got first, and I did start playing it. And you needed a copy of the manual for Bards Tale as well, because it had all the spells that you cast were in the manual. You had to type the spell in. It didn't like give you a list of spells. You had to type. There was like a 4-letter code that you typed in for
Nibble.
Yeah.
Mangar's Mind Blade.
Yes, exactly. Those were some of them. So you had to type in this 4-letter code to cast your spells. And obviously, if you don't have, if you can't cast spells, you don't have magic use, you're not going to do very well in the game. And the Bard songs, which were kind of like a spell, were also, if I remember right, the 4-letter code that you had to type in for it. So I guess kind of a level of copy protection for and Electronic Arts made the Bards Tale, if I remember right. Yes, that's that is So Bards Tale had an interface that was a lot like Wizardry, but it was just the graphics were a little better by that point.
Okay.
And it was and it looked a little bit, it allowed you to kind of get a sense of where you were. There were outdoor areas, not just dungeons and things like that. And what was interesting about Bard's Tale is you could import characters from Wizardry and Ultima 4, which was another game I played. However, I played Ultima 4 after I played the Bard's Tale.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I never did finish Bard's Tale 3. I got like 90% of the way through the game, and I don't remember. I thought you had to go back to the inns to save in Bard's Tale 3, but somehow I got stuck in this dungeon, and my character's mostly dead, and my mages had like no spell points. Now, if your characters sat and didn't move, they would they wouldn't be attacked, so you couldn't get attacked if you didn't move. But your mages would somehow recover spell points, like if you just sat there. So I let the game run while I went to school, and every time I got home, it had crashed. So I could never get enough spell points to heal my party and get through one of these last dungeons. And I was just so frustrated by that I quit playing it. So, Ultima 4, like I said, it was now I don't know. Should I let you interject here? I'm just rambling. No, is this
it's really fascinating to, especially hearing from the perspective of, I didn't get a computer, I think, and I got a TRS 80.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I had the good fortune of getting the cassette drive
that
I could save my work.
Right.
You talk to people now who have grown up with, you talk to like somebody who's like in their 20s now, and you're like, oh, and I had a 3 1/4 inch floppy, and they're like, what?
Right.
What is that? Or, or 3 1/2 inch floppy and the 5 1/4 inch.
5 1/4 inches. Right. Exactly.
And, God, I remember when I first went to high school, somebody actually showed us, what was it? It was like a 10 inch or 8 inch floppy, like one of the original floppy drives that are,
it's almost as big as a record. Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Right. It looks like a 5 1/4, but it's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was my sophomore year of high school. I think it was 1985, 86. And our computer science teacher, Mr. Gallagher, came in and he wheeled and very carefully wheeled in an Apple computer, an Apple II, into the room. And he's like, and this is the future. And he showed us our first CD-ROM. And when I tell you this, and he's like, and you can put the information of an entire phone book inside of it, and you're like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing ever. And it's a shiny disc, and you don't have to worry about hitting it with a magnet and having all your stuff. I mean, oh God, somebody did something really awful to me. Our writing lab, being the geek that I was, I hung out in the writing lab, and the writing lab is where we had computers and you could just go in there and write. And they had Commodore 64 computers, and you had a 5 1/4 inch floppy drive to put your stuff on. And somebody actually cut out with a knife a section of the data and like turned it so you couldn't see it. And I put it in the drive, and it made this horrendous
Oh no.
And so, when you talk to people about computers at that point in time, your Commodore 64 was 64K of onboard memory. And we talk about, gig now. I mean, at that point in time, somebody said a gigabyte, and we went, you're making that up.
Right.
My
doesn't.
first computer that had a big like IBM computer had a 20 meg hard drive. I'm like, I am never filling that thing up.
Yeah.
So my biggest game was like Dragon Lord or something. And it's like, and that's only like 1.1 megs, and that's like 8 discs.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember buying my first 1 gig hard drive in 1998 and going, oh my God, I'll never fill this up. And of course, I was playing like Riven
Oh yeah.
and Myst
Sure.
and, games like that. And, you wouldn't fit. And then soon enough, of course, you'd fill that up and then you get another. And that drive cost me like $150 for 1 gig.
Right, exactly.
And right now I've got a 16 gig flash drive in my pocket.
Yep. I've got one on my keychain.
I mean, things change so fast.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to see that progression of how things change over time based on the technology that you have available.
Well, I think it is pretty incredible with the limited resources they had with computers, what they did with them.
Oh,
too,
absolutely.
I mean, a game like Ultima 4, which it took somewhere between 40 and 50 hours to play Ultima 4. I mean, it was the first game that I played that my parents were actually concerned about how much time I was spending on the game,
Sure.
That was, and it was a huge influence on the first Final Fantasy, which I have played. You had all these quests. You had to become 8 parts of the avatar. You had to get like 3 parts of this key. You had to find this secret word. You had to translate the rune. You had to find this entrance to this cave. There was all these things all these quests and missions that you had to do. There were side missions. You could converse with people in it. And I mean, this is, I can't remember how many discs it was. I think it might've been on 8 5.25-inch discs or something like that.
Yeah.
It might have been less than that actually. And that a 5.25-inch disc had maybe 500 K on it, right?
Yeah, I think it was about
500 kilobytes on it. Where a 3.5? Yeah, 3.5.
3.5 had a meg.
Yeah, it had about a little over a meg on it, I think. And I mean, you've got all this stuff on basically what the size of a JPEG would be today.
Yeah, no kidding.
What your iPhone takes for a JPEG is how much information they had to put Ultima 4 into.
Yeah.
So
just try to wrap your heads around that, kids.
It's incredible. So I mean, it's just kind of an interesting thing. And again, I don't think we should be making games that are 600K or anything like that.
No, but it's just really
not what I'm saying. But
I gotta say too, that for those younger people out there, when you talk about how the same information for one picture in your phone was what they did for Ultima 3, it didn't mean that Ultima 3 was a small game.
No, right? No, absolutely.
I remember the 2 big things that were a huge selling point to me as a kid was how many discs did it come on?
Right.
Yeah. That was huge. More discs means better game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, the Ultima games several games would list the average playing time.
Right.
And I forget which Ultima it was. One of the early ones, it said average playing time 300 hours.
Right, exactly.
I'm like, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. And it did. I mean, it took that long. I think Ultima 4 might have taken more like a couple hundred hours to play, because you did have a ton of quests to play. And it was summertime. I was playing this thing. My parents were very upset that I was sitting on this computer that ostensibly bought me to help my education. I was doing this. I remember they made me drive. They took me to a nature trail up in the north of Wisconsin, and made me hike it. And during the ride there and back, it was like about an hour and a half we drove up there. I remember thinking the whole time that I wish there was a portable computer that I could use to play the game. When my parents may waste time on that trip, I was like, there'll never be a portable computer powerful enough to play something like Ultima. But yeah, I mean, they were very involved. It was not like it was not a simple game. The Ultima series was as complex as something like Final Fantasy is today. I mean, with the quests and missions and the kind of things that the graphics are obviously much better in Final Fantasy, but and obviously there's a lot, but the quests and the missions and things like that, it's as complex as that. The storyline was very complex. So
thinking of all the games that you have and have played, what one would you, if you could take like a week's vacation and not have to deal with another living soul and just play that game,
put up with the guys like you at work?
Yeah, because we're jackasses.
Right.
If you were, what game would you play?
I think what I'd actually like to do this is play Champions of Krynn and the Dragonlance series and the Gold Box games, Champs of Krynn, Death Knights of Krynn, and Dark Queen of Krynn.
Yes.
Those are really the last games in the Gold Box series that I played. They came out in the early 90s and they were really cool. I mean, Pool of Radiance was a cool game. I mean, it had a, it was Dungeons and Dragons finally, and it was a good port of Dungeons and Dragons. There's been some not so great computer versions of Dungeons and Dragons over the years, and there's been pretty good one. I mean, there's good modern, like Baldur's Gate's pretty good. Edition of Dungeons and Dragons but there's been some really bad ones as well. But Champions of Krynn it was Dungeons and Dragons. You had really, for the time, great graphics, and I've always liked the Gold Box system. The Gold Box had kind of the Bards Tale type interface where you had this little window in the upper left-hand corner, and you navigated dungeons and towns like that. But when you went into combat, it was a top-down view. You had all your characters there, turn-based combat again, but you could see like there were walls and things like that. You could bounce like chain lightning off the wall, and
nice.
Actually, there's a Gold Box game called Curse of the Azure Bonds, and until I figured out that I could bounce things off walls, I couldn't. There was like a whole slew of dark elves I had to fight, and once I boxed them off into this corner and just threw chain lightning and stuff at him, then I was finally able to defeat him. Otherwise, if I let him walk around, I got slaughtered.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I'm like, how can you play this? I've got my characters in Pool of Radiance; they're leveled up. I don't get how, but it required some strategy, and so I like the Gold Box. The Gold Box system is probably my favorite CRPG from the 80s. But Champions of Krynn really put the Dragonlance series really put it together, I thought, and I really like those, and I think I would probably play those.
Nice.
So
now you talk about the abandonware stuff. Can you actually get those now?
Yeah, you can. There's a game called Knights of Legend, which I have here. That was on. I actually have the discs for this one. I think it's on 5 discs or something. It's on 4 discs. And it was an Origin game. And I always thought it was very involved. I always thought it was a really cool game. But you had to switch discs like all the time, and like you would go through the forest or whatever and get randomly attacked. It's like it would be 10 minutes you'd have to it would take to load up the the combat sequence, and I was like, well, this will be a lot better if I don't have to wait for all these discs. I'm going to try to play this again. And I think it was probably 10 years ago that I tried this. So there is a abandonware I don't know whatever you call it version of it out there, and I downloaded that. And the combat system for it is just so cumbersome and slow. It was still a horrible game. So I thought once I took away all the disc swapping and the problems that I had on the Commodore 64 version, that it would be a lot better game. But it unfortunately was still flawed. The combat system in it was too flawed. It was more like I don't know. The combat system was just not evolved enough in Knights of Legend to. I really always did like the game, but even today, it's not. Even with all the advances and not disc swapping, it doesn't make it a very good game. So,
sure.
But it is one that I spent a lot of time playing as well. I decided that I was going to try to beat Knights of Legend, and I played it like I would do all-nighters, and it was during summer. I'd go to sleep at like 6 o'clock in the morning, sleep till like 1 in the afternoon, just play it back again until 6 o'clock in the morning. And I remember I know it was 1991 I did this, because every time I hear the Right Said Fred song,
Yep.
and U2's, I think, Mysterious Ways.
Yep. Yep.
It was like all the hits from that because obviously the sound wasn't anything to be excited about. So
Yeah.
I played the radio during the time I was playing. But
Speaking of sound, the one thing that a lot of kids these days,
right, that's kind of what we sound like to any of the younger listeners, unfortunately.
Back in my day, no, the sound. Yeah, we have a drinking game that now is associated with any of the Galactic Netcast shows.
Okay.
And you can go to the Galactic Netcast's Facebook group page, and you can see all the rules as to what would cause you to take a drink. And one of those, me saying back in my day with the old man voice, is one of those. I always do it again in that voice, but you'd have to drink another drink again, and that things would rapidly go downhill. There's a certain, I don't know, romance to sounds that you will never hear again. You can, I could go into, the office next to mine and talk to Jack, and Jack is in his mid-20s. Wonderful guy. But if you say, God, do you remember the sound of a 5 1/4-inch floppy drive, like loading up a game? Yeah, exactly. And he'd go, what's that? And you go, imagine a bunch of, like, if you were to take Angry Bees and cross that sound with a drunken old sailor that's stumbling around and put that in a metal box and then shake it. That's what it would sound like.
That is a very, very apt description.
Yes. And the sound of even a modem handshaking. That's something you don't hear anymore. Or a fax machine. Right. There's a certain, playing games like Impossible Mission on Commodore 64 or Bruce Lee.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever. Oh, man.
But there was a certain point where if you listened and if you'd played enough games, you could tell right at the point, and you get excited because you're like, oh, it's finishing up. It's finishing up the load, because it would sound a certain way right before it finished up. And, those are sounds you're never going to hear again. And, and that's sad in a certain way. But, that said, looking at what happened with technology in the 80s, like we said earlier, that with the prices coming down with computers, and then people creating the games, as the technology progressed, so did what you could do in a game. You actually eventually in time had mapping. You didn't have to map it yourself anymore. Yep. You had graphical representations of the people that you were fighting, because graphics got a little bit better, and computers could process more information and give that to you, and so on and so forth. And it was always kind of pushing the boundaries of what something can do. And now we're at a point where we talk about Skyrim. You playing Skyrim. Right. It's just wonderful to see that progression.
Absolutely incredible. Like with the the enchantments and the things you can make, the alchemy that you can do in that game. It's incredible.
Sure. So. Absolutely.
I gotta ask, did either of you guys ever play Telengard?
I don't believe I have played that one.
That was one of the first ones I ever played. I actually played it on a TRS-80.
Okay.
That's why it sounds familiar.
And you were the graphics was all ASCII. So like,
wow, okay. Like that's awesome.
Treasure was a $sign, monsters were a number sign. It was pretty freaking cool, because you had there's 50 levels to the dungeon.
Wow.
With 2 million rooms.
Oh God, yes.
And the only way to save was you had to go back to an inn, and it would automatically save your game. And if you died, it was just you in the dungeon, and it stole a lot from Dungeons and Dragons, because you had your strength, your constitution, and you pick up rings of regeneration and sword +1 and a shield +2 and cloak of Elvenkind, and you had 20 monsters to fight, and it was so addictive, though it was so repetitive.
Yeah,
he was wandering around fighting a level 2 elf, a level 1 kobold, and
Yeah, and I just pulled it up on Wikipedia. It's Telengard, Telengard. It was
Yeah.
a game that was created in 1982. The platforms, I'm going to throw out some names here. We're all going to laugh, and you're all going to run to Wikipedia and find out why it's funny. The Commodore PET.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The Apple II Plus, the TRS-80, the Atari 800, the Commodore 64, and the IBM PC DOS were the available platforms for that game in 1982.
Wow.
I remember it because there was a small group of some of us that would sneak into like the language lab or into the library at Wausau West, where I went to high school, and we would play some of these games.
Okay.
And that's as soon as I saw the picture of what one of the rooms looked like, which you were going and explore and fight, I'm like, oh God, yes, I've watched somebody play that over their shoulder. Yeah, I
played it last week.
Awesome.
Seriously?
I was playing it last week.
Very cool.
I have had a copy on every PC I have owned for the last 15 years. Every now and then, I'll just go through and I'll create a character and I'll just play. And I'll just go till he dies.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, the Commodore PET is what they had in elementary school.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what
what
I wanted to learn, what made me want to learn BASIC. I guess.
And that's where I cut my teeth in BASIC as well. And so everybody has kind of an understanding. If you've never seen a Commodore PET, imagine a metal box that had a keyboard mounted to it. And then as a part of this whole setup, and this was all one piece, was a monochrome green monitor. It wasn't the amber, but it was the green monochrome monitor. And any game that you played was in ASCII. Anything that you did that was graphically based was done in ASCII, because there was just no graphical
graphic
thoughts at that point. I mean, you could do pokes and peeks to like create sound and stuff like that, but graphics was just really difficult to do.
I think just like the Commodore 64, it had actual ASCII graphics on the keys that you could use an alternate key to get like a circle or something like that, so.
Yep. So yeah, I mean that we're really dipping into, and that was made by Avalon Hill.
Yeah.
And when I think Avalon Hill, I think Axis and Allies. I mean, I think board games. And I really get the feeling that, and maybe it's not a feeling, it's just logical progression. You had companies like TSR, you had companies like Avalon Hill moving into the next generation and getting their foot in the door early to try to get as much market share in this new format as they possibly could. So
yeah, that's absolutely what TSR did with SSI. When they saw Ultima, they realized they needed to get on that. And is TSR making any graphical based games, or are they just licensing their stuff out to I think they just license their stuff out, and I haven't seen any since Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale. I haven't really seen anything very good coming out of from D&D. I downloaded there's something on the PlayStation Store, I think, that it was some sort of third-person type dungeon game.
Okay. It
was not very good. And that was the last thing I played that was based on D&D, that had the D&D license, I guess.
Sure. And not entirely off topic, I think the one time that I really played something that was D&D based in the 80s that was a computer game was my best friend Greg had an Intellivision.
Oh wow, I was gonna say that.
Yeah, and I played D&D on Intellivision.
That's awesome.
And oh my God, he would come over to my house and we would play like until he'd come over at like maybe after he had dinner, so like at about 6 or 7 o'clock, and he'd come over and we'd play until like midnight, 1 o'clock.
Right.
And he would like drag his whole Intellivision, and I lived maybe just a little less than a quarter of a mile up the road from him, and he would lug this thing up there with the game, and we'd attach it to my TV, and we would play for hours.
Awesome.
oh my God, it was just, and by today's standards, of course, the graphics really aren't there. But what's really interesting is I think within the past 5 or 10 years, they've come out with like some of the best of Intellivision.
Oh, really? Okay.
Games for. I think I have one for PlayStation and one for Xbox, or maybe they're both for PlayStation. I can't recall. The one game that they really couldn't get the licensing for. Dungeons and Dragons. Which, I'm like, oh, I really want to, oh, it's not on this one. Well, there's a couple games in here I want to try. And then the next one will come out and I'm like, oh, God, oh no, it's not here either. Damn it. But it was really, and you had different levels of toughness of sword and based on the material it was made out of.
Wow,
and,
so it was actually, I've never played the Intellivision D&D. It is actually pretty involved then, huh?
It is. Huh. And I mean, I'm trying to remember how many, there were like 30 levels.
Wow.
In this structure. Okay. Basically you went into this structure and it was designed so that you'd walk through all the different layers, and there were like, maybe 20, I'd have to look it up, but like maybe 20 or 30 different levels in the depths of this dungeon. And of course, the further down you went, the more difficult the monsters were. And then when you got to the end, you fought the dragon.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. I remember seeing it advertised in comic books in the 80s, but never got to play it.
Yeah, I was. My friend Greg's like, hey, guess what I got? What? Dungeons and Dragons? Like, shut up!
That's great.
It was.
I had one friend who had an Intellivision. We played B-17 Bomber a lot, I think.
And that was when they
the voice pack.
Yes, they just introduced the voice technology for B-17 Bomber. Bombs away.
Yeah, incidentally, console gaming, I guess, is what kind of took me away from. I didn't throughout college. I never really had. My computer was a word processor basically, and I did all my gaming on consoles. So after about 1993, I wasn't really playing any computer-based games anymore, and I did. I played some of the Final Fantasies and some of the other stuff on things like, I mean, it's not really RPG, but like Resident Evil on the first PlayStation. And I didn't really get back into computer gaming again until the 2000s. So, and then I just unfortunately didn't have a lot of time to devote to RPGs, and they'd gotten so advanced after that, decade that I was away, that, it was like every game was 300, every game was as advanced as Ultima with way better graphics and stuff. And I had to, figure out the combat system and all this stuff. So, unfortunately, I just haven't been able to, devote as much time as I'd like to some of these new RPGs that have come out. But that's kind of what console gaming kind of ended my CRPG, all the CRPG gaming I was doing in the 80s and early 90s. So.
Sure. Well, I think that the technology had progressed so much, and once you had reached a point where you could have a dedicated system that had the ability to render stuff, especially like real-time stuff, like in like Skyrim or Halo. Granted, we're out of the fantasy realm there in RPGs, but once I keep going back to Fallout. Like Fallout, the first two Fallouts and Fallout Tactics, and that was from a top-down, and turn-based. And then once you get to Fallout 3, which I have for PlayStation 3, that got into, you could still do turn-based. I mean, you still would walk around, but once you got into combat, it would still pop into turn-based combat.
Okay. Yeah, I know you had said that there's, you just don't see it a lot anymore.
No, you don't, and that's kind of a shame, because at that point, you get back into the strategy, like you were saying before.
Right, you have some time to think about. You don't have to react necessarily. You have some time to kind of plan what you're doing, and there's just a certain, I don't know, something about it that I like. There's a more relaxed. Can think about what you're trying to do with your characters and stuff. And again, it's a little bit more like a pencil and paper RPG that way. Yeah. So
no, absolutely.
But when I was playing, like when the Commodore 64 was my computer RPG machine, the consoles just weren't up to speed. NES had Final Fantasy, which was an okay game. I mean, that Final Fantasy 1 was a pretty decent RPG. Also Dragon Warrior, which was pretty good, and more of a Japanese, I think more popular in Japan, but I did play it. I have an interesting story about Dragon Warrior. It's probably not appropriate for here, but I'll have to tell it to you later.
Okay.
I've told it to you before, but yeah, until the PlayStation 1 and probably the PlayStation 2, consoles just weren't up to. They didn't have the kind of advanced stuff that a computer could do.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I missed, in the mid to late '90s, I missed that. There were a lot of good role playing games that were on PC, but my computer was my PC that I had was it didn't have a graphics card or good sound card or anything like that. I couldn't play any of them. So
yeah.
It had like Bank Street Writer, I think.
Yes, Bank Street Writer. There's a blast from the past.
That's how I got through college with Bank Street Writer and my dot matrix printer. So.
You kids these days, take a drink. All right, Glenn. I'm going to throw that question to you. You've played some of the earlier computer-based RPGs. If you could go and if you could have a week of time dedicated to just playing a game, what would that be?
Wow. I might go back and do the original Bards Tale. No,
good choice.
I would go back through Ultima 4.
That's a great choice, actually. That's another one I'd like to play as well. I mean, it really is very involved, very, very cool game. I remember, you remember playing Ultima 4, Glenn? Remember how you created your character? You like answered a series of questions and then
you went and saw the oracle in her card.
Right. It's very cool. It's a really, really cool game. And
nice.
I that's a good choice. That's a great choice, actually.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap that up then. Thank you very much for that, Andy.
Thanks for having me on.
One of those things where to truly appreciate what you boys and girls have today, you need to look back in time and see where we came from. No, it's one of those things where you don't really get to hear about where things started and the joy that something that by today's standards is so simple brought you as much joy as if you were to play Skyrim now.
Right.
It was pushing a boundary that had just come into being, and being at the forefront, at the early frontier of that conversion of that RPG pencil and paper experience to the computer was mind-blowing. And to be a part of that at its early stages and to be able to talk about that is wonderful, and it's good to share so that people really appreciate all the Skyrims and the other games that they have today. Right. So, all right. We're going to wrap things up here. We're going to talk about Hello, My Name Is. It's your opportunity to tell us about your favorite RPG character, or, be it computer or pencil and paper characters that you're playing or have played that you really enjoyed. Just have a few fields for you to fill out with your name, your character's name, the system that character was in, and just tell us a little bit about why it was cool for you to play that character. And you can find that if you go to galacticnetcasts.com and click on the Adventure Party page, and you'll see an icon off to the right-hand side that says, Hello, My Name Is, and you can fill out that information. Yes, we do ask for your email address, but that's only for us to email you a frameable certificate saying that you and your character appeared on the show. We do not spam people. I do not have a service where I will email people because, one, it takes too much time, and two, I don't care to do that to people. So there you go. I just want to wrap things up and thank Andy for taking the time to talk about the history of digital RPGs.
Thanks a lot, Brad.
Thanks
for having me on. It was a blast.
Absolutely. And want to thank Glenn for, of course, joining us again on this journey. And Glenn, we haven't talked about this in the past, but you actually have a YouTube channel where you review movies.
That I do.
Tell us about it.
That would be the B Movie Bunker. Find it on my channel is actually Naked Hobo Productions, and you can find the B Movie Bunker. I just posted my review of this little movie about this guy named Max. It's a heartwarming story about a young boy who plays with cars. And I don't normally review mainstream films. So I did Mad Max and I did Age of Ultron. Normally I do stuff you're not going to see in the theaters. I do a lot of horror and a lot of cheesy kind of sci-fi. I mean, B movies. That's mostly what I do. It's just sometimes I see a movie that I like enough that I'll do a review, or if it's a big enough hype movie I see like Age of Ultron, I'll do a little review of it if I get to see it early, which I did. But some of my favorite movies I've watched have been ones that you won't find in the big theater releases, like Troll Hunter, and one I just watched I liked that was Babadook.
Oh yeah, okay.
So yeah, I do a lot of stuff on there, and I mean, which actually led me to a bunch of the other podcasts I do with some of Brad and I's mutual friend, Mark the Movie Man. And it's just it's a blast. I love doing them. I don't have a lot of viewers, but that's not why I do it. I do it because I like talking about these things. And if one or two people sees my review of Babadook and goes out and watches it, that's good, because these are movies that need the support.
Sure. Yep. No,
Age of Ultron doesn't need my review to get people to go out and see it.
Yeah, I heard it made a few bucks, so it probably doesn't need the help. Now, your RPG Mistrunner, where can people find out more about that?
Well, you can find some outdated information on mistrunner.com. I need to update that. We've just started working on. We're updating the rules. I'm basically going to redo the almost the entire rule set, because there's things that as more and more people have played it beyond just the initial play testers. Now people have played it in long-running campaigns. We've gotten good feedback. So on Facebook, you can find it's just Mistrunner the RPG. And if you don't want to go through a lot of things, you can just email me, and I can get you information. Anything at mistrunner.com will get to me. But
you can literally type in anything at mistrunner.com.
Yes. Actually, that's wrong. If you send it to Fluffy, that won't get to me, because
that's right. That goes to Jeff Waltersdorf.
Jeff Waltersdorf, who was one of the artists and one of the playtesters for years for the game. Sure. But probably the best way is Biff at mistrunner.com, BIF at mistrunner.com, and I'll get that information, and I can. That's how I used to spread news of the game, was through email, because I didn't have a website back in those days, because there weren't websites back when I first started it.
No, exactly.
The first ramblings of Mistrunner was on a BBS site. So
wow, that's taking it back a ways.
So to be like Brad, back in my day.
All right, you can find more about the Adventure Party on galacticnetcasts.com, and there you can find all the social media outlets where we're at on YouTube. We record this video live, and then the audio gets edited, and then we post that as an audio podcast. And if you go to the YouTube channel, you can see basically the unedited raw version of every episode and meeting of the Adventure Party that we've done. We appear on iTunes and Stitcher, so if you can, take a moment or two and give us a review. Let us know what you think about the show. Especially at this point in time, we're thinking about dropping the news and just doing game reviews. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea? Do you think we should reconsider that? I guess kind of the impetus, kind of the thought process behind it is, if you are a diehard RPG player, and we're still trying to gauge who's all listening. If you're a diehard RPG player, you probably have your finger on the pulse of the news of the games that you enjoy. So, maybe we could spend that time doing the Adventure Party with something a little bit better, like a game review. So give us some feedback and let us know. You can leave us that feedback by emailing galacticnetcasts@gmail.com, or you can call our number, which is 805-328-3730. 805-328-3966. And you can leave us a message, or you can actually text that number that I just gave you, 805-328-3966. You can also go to the website. We use WordPress for the website, and we found a great plugin where if you have a microphone attached to your computer, you can click the icon on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can just leave us a audio message that way. You don't have to dial any numbers. You don't have to use your phone. You can just use your computer, click the icon, and give us a shout, and then it does its magic thing, and then it emails us the MP3 file generated from you giving us feedback. So really appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us at the Adventure Party. May your characters never die and your adventures always be epic. Good night.